For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
We have seen in recent days how the SABC has been hauled before the court, but at the same time there are troubles at other state entities like the SAA. How do you understand this?
Yes, the SABC and the SAA have been hauled before the courts in recent times. There has been some litigation in regard to raising loans for SAA. The SABC question goes to the core of freedom of expression and the type of democracy that we want to build. And I think what people had in mind in 1994 is that the SABC would be transformed from having been a tool of the apartheid regime to being a public broadcaster. Now, the notion of a public broadcaster is controversial. Even in Britain, people say the BBC is biased, and things like that. But in the early years after apartheid, when Zwelakhe Sisulu was CEO of the SABC, I remember that quite a few things changed, and it was quite interesting. And until recently, I used to flip between SABC and ENCA, and now for a long time, for about 4 or 5 years, I just stopped watching SABC. Not because of Raudi Motswaneng, but basically the quality of the programs, the quality of the news is not of a high standard, and the analysts they get are very weak. So there's been like a setback, and you also have this situation where the previous chair of the SABC, Ellen Chabalala, and Motswaneng himself have been found to not have the qualifications they claimed they have, and courts of law have repeatedly ruled that Motswaneng is not a fit person to hold the office. And in the case of Chabalala before, there had to be a lot of cases which we as taxpayers paid for before she resigned. So you have this situation where Motswaneng is operating under incredible cloud of impending court cases. Every time one case says that he can't be in his office, they appeal, and they're still appealing. Now, in this situation, most people would be fairly cautious in the way that they carry out their jobs. They would actually be aware of the fact that there's a sword of Damocles, whatever it's called, hanging over their head, and they can actually lose their job very easily. But the difference in this case is that Motswaneng is actually very, very bold and abrasive, and the way he responded when the ICASA, the regulatory body, a few weeks ago declared that it was illegal to censor the news and forced the journalists on the SABC to stop broadcasting protests, he just says no one will tell us what to do. And what one has here, and we know also that a number of journalists have been fired, what we have here is that people, it's almost a rerun of the Nkandla public protector situation, because there's also a public protector finding on Motswaneng, and there's also a question of the status of the ICASA ruling. And the courts have already decided that the rulings of the ICASA, or the recommendations, are binding. So that if they have gone to court yesterday, and an interdict, or the day before, interdict declared that the SABC had to abide by the ICASA ruling, and they undertook to do so. But what I think is important to ask ourselves is, why do people like Motsoeneng, the minister to whom he is accountable, the chair of the board of the SABC, act in such a defiant manner? And in the case of the SABC, the first thing we know is that Motsoeneng enjoys the support of the minister and apparently the president. And you have this situation where the law is invoked and they simply defy the law. They defy the law because there is something higher than the law in the eyes of these people. And this person is Ubaba. Ubaba loves Hlaudi, the minister said. And the fact that he loves him is seen by them as more powerful a force than any court in South Africa. So this is the problem that we're facing, is that we as citizens are being robbed of the opportunity of access to information. We shouldn't have to go to ENCA as the first port of call. The public broadcaster in many countries is the most reliable source of news and analysis. Now, we can't do that. And it affects our freedom of expression, affects the professionalism and the freedom of expression of the journalists in the SABC who have been fired. Also, what some people say is that even if the journalists win, they've brought a labour court case as well, even if they win the case and they are forced to re-employ them at the SABC, Motsoeneng will continue to interfere, they say, and secondly, the atmosphere will be such that there's a problem. So really, this issue will not be resolved unless they abide by the rulings and they get rid of this man.
So what does this tell us about the unity within the ANC as well as the ANC-led alliance?
You see, government in the first place has to take charge, or the state has to take charge, and the responsible minister should be taking charge. Now, she has felt that she can defy these court orders. She's herself defied a court order in connection with the digital migration. She has defied the portfolio committee in Parliament. She has felt that she doesn't have to attend meetings when she's summoned by the ANC subcommittee. I think it's important to understand that the ANC can't run government, even though we are told ANC determines deployments and all of that. ANC is a political organization. Government operates the state on behalf of all citizens. Nevertheless, as a member of the ANC, I think she's on the NEC, but even if she's not in the NEC, if you are summoned to a meeting by a committee relating to your portfolio, you should be attending there. If the Secretary General of the ANC says they must abide by regulation, you can't just say, no, we're not going to do it. Mantashe does count some weight as the leader, the de facto, day-to-day leader of the ANC as the Secretary General. So what you're seeing is the conflicting messages. The President hasn't said anything. It's interesting. Some people exercise their power by statements. Some people exercise their power by silence, by not saying in public that SABC must abide by this ruling. The President is implying, it's fine, go ahead, I love you, and so forth, as the Minister says he loves Motsoeneng. So we've got a problem, but the problem is a problem within the ANC itself, which is manifested in the relationship between the Treasury and SAA, the Treasury and SARS, the president's relationship to the Treasury and his protection of acts of defiance in these other state entities. So what we've got here is a situation where the ANC is obviously divided, but it faces an election. So on one level, it doesn't suit the ANC to have these different voices. And that may be one of the reasons also why the president doesn't contradict the Secretary General. But he doesn't contradict the Secretary General, and at the same time, he doesn't say a word to indicate that they should abide by the court rulings, so that he thinks perhaps that he's maintaining ANC unity. There's a deeper problem here, and it may well be that the ANC realizes that they've got to get rid of Zuma, but they don't want to do it before the elections, which is 2 weeks' time. And secondly, they don't really have a candidate yet who can unite everyone, and who, you know, they don't want a repeat of the Suttner situation where people got afraid that the gains that they made from the incumbent would disappear if someone new came there. So whoever comes there, unless ANC politics changes substantially, has got to service certain relationships of patronage and so forth. That is part of the problem we face.
Thank you, Raymond. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about public entities and contempt for the public.